One of the simplest ways, not easiest, but simplest ways you can stand out in a crowd in your corporate job or everyday life is to learn how to speak properly. So many people don't learn public speaking skills, and it has a drastic negative impact on their careers, how they're perceived, their trajectories. In my opinion, it's one of the most important things you can do. I was listening to a guy on a call today give a demo presentation to a potential client, and he said or like 40 times in 2 minutes. It was actually unbearable to listen to. When you do things like use filler words, you appear, sometimes subconsciously to the consumer or listener, less competent or like you really don't know what you're talking about. So limit your filler words. Filler words such as like, things like that. Right kills me. And you don't even notice it, but when you call it out, it starts to really stick out like a sore thumb. As you can see, I'm recording this video in one take to prove the point that you can do it. This is a learned skill. I had to learn how to speak concisely, clearly, and quickly without using filler words because oftentimes we're just doing that to let our brains catch up to our mouths. You can simply replace the or like with a pause or a breath. The best public speakers, the people you love listening to talk, you may not even realize it, but part of the reason you love them is because they're good at talking. So learn how to speak publicly, take a Toastmasters course, watch YouTube content, record yourself speaking. It's such a simple thing that you can practice every single day that is going to make you stand out so far above and ahead of the rest of the pack. That's all.
The man you just heard is Michael Smoke from Higher Up Wellness, talking about a very simple way to become a more articulate speaker and stand out or distinguish yourself or make an impression in a crowd of people who, generally speaking, never invest the time to develop the skill that is speaking effectively. One of the most common questions I get from people learning English is, how do I improve my speaking skills? And the answer I often give is simply, speak more. But I understand that for some people, this advice is frustrating because it's not specific enough. You want to know exactly what you should be doing to improve your ability to speak properly. So in today's episode, with the help of Michael Smoke, I'm going to give you some practical tips that will make you a better speaker regardless of your current level of English. Now, after Michael posted the video you just heard, someone left a comment on the video asking Michael to speak in more detail about this idea. So he made another video, and that's what I'm going to play for you now.
Glossophobia, otherwise known as the fear of public speaking, is ranked in some research and surveys as people's #1 fear above death. But it doesn't have to be that way. So here's how I became a more eloquent and proficient public speaker and general communicator in my day-to-day life. Quick disclaimer, I went to college and have a bachelor's of business administration in something called professional sales. It's not super common, there's only 30 schools in the country that do it, but a lot of our major was around sales call role plays and public speaking engagements. We were literally graded on our ability to articulate ourselves. And in doing so, I got a lot of this training as part of my degree. But here are the things that we did that made us better. #1, kill your filler words altogether as often as you can, even in daily communication. Some people argue it makes you more human. I disagree. I just don't use them and I sound totally normal. Like, the phrase things like that, right. These are all filler words that don't add value to sentences. Replace those filler words with a pause or a breath. It's simply your brain and mouth trying to get on the same page. So instead of putting the senseless, stupid word there, simply pause for just a moment. A lot of people also argue that they're uncomfortable with the silence, so they put or like. That's just a shitty excuse. Stop that, get rid of it, be okay with a second or two of being quiet.
All right, my friend. Now, this first tip is something that will undoubtedly make you sound like a much more powerful and competent speaker. As Michael said, using filler words such as um, like, right? Or even phrases such as things like that, stuff like that, things of that nature. All of these make you sound like you don't really know what you're talking about, or at the very least, like you don't know what you're going to say next, and you're just making it up as you go along. And this is something that I'm particularly focused on improving these days because I use many of these filler words all the time. If you're a regular listener of this podcast, then you hear me say, right? And things like that in almost every episode, especially if I'm not reading a script. But using these words is often just our way of allowing our brains to catch up with our mouths. Meaning, we finished saying our last sentence before we've completely decided what our next sentence is going to be. So instead of simply pausing to make that decision, we try to fill the silence with words that don't add any meaning or value to our overall message. Thus, we dilute our message. But one of the things that all great speakers do is choose their words carefully. They think about what it is they really want to say before they say it. Then they say exactly what they mean and nothing more. This allows each word to retain or keep its value because it's not being watered down by a bunch of unnecessary words that don't add value. And this is one of the things that makes us sound more confident when we speak. We don't feel the need to fill those moments of silence with meaningless words or forced laughter to keep our listeners' attention or lighten the mood. We're confident enough in ourselves to give ourselves the time we need to gather our thoughts and choose our words, or simply pause for a moment to let our last sentence leave a more lasting impression on our listener. Because silence can be very useful when we want someone to not just understand what we're saying, but feel and really think about what we're saying. And we lose that ability as soon as we disrupt the silence with filler words. Now, you may think that using filler words will make you sound more natural, and that's probably because you've heard so many native speakers using them on a daily basis. But understand that just because something is common doesn't mean that it's good. As I said before, very few people invest in their speaking skills, and the end result is speech that's full of linguistic crutches that we use to compensate for our lack of ability. I guarantee once you start paying attention to this, it'll be impossible to stop. You might even find yourself getting annoyed by people's use of filler words once you realize how meaningless they are and how often we rely on them when speaking. So the obvious question here is, okay, how do I stop using filler words? And that's what Michael is going to speak about next.
Tip number 2 is record yourself talking and watch it like an athlete watches game film. A lot of times, simply recording yourself speaking and hearing how silly you sound when you use filler words is just enough motivation to stop using them altogether. Hell, you can even make a TikTok burner account and post videos for the internet to see to really put some fear into it to give you a motivation to be a better speaker.
All right, my friends. So, Michael suggests recording yourself speaking and self evaluating in order to remove filler words from your speech and sound more competent. He even mentions creating a burner account to really put yourself out there and be seen by strangers who might judge or critique you. And when he says burner account, this term burner before anything like burner account, burner phone, burner something, in this case, let's focus on account. He's referring to a temporary or disposable account on social media that's intended for short term use and will then be discarded or deleted afterwards. So you could create a second TikTok or Instagram account that no one knows about and record a 60 to 90-second video of yourself speaking literally every day for free. And that way, you'll not only be able to evaluate your own speech, but strangers on the internet might give you feedback on how to improve. And of course, they might just shit on you and try to make you feel bad about your current level. But remember, haters do not hate on losers. Now, to take it a step further, you could even record yourself speaking, transcribe the audio for free, and then read your thoughts word by word, which makes it easier to analyze. You can also take that transcription, paste it into a tool like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, and ask for feedback. What words should I remove to sound more clear and confident? How would I express the same idea in a formal way? Which sentences are grammatically incorrect and why? Give me some alternatives for the following words and phrases. These are all things you can type into an AI tool in order to improve your speaking and writing skills by yourself. Now, of course, you should always verify what the AI is telling you by talking to real people, but we'll get to that later in the episode. For now, you should focus on and understand the idea that recording and evaluating your performance is one of the best ways to improve it. This is exactly what professional athletes do at the highest level. They spend hours analyzing past matches in order to identify their mistakes and weaknesses so they know exactly what to focus on in their next training session. And as they continue to train those particular skills, they continue to improve them. I tell people all the time that part of what made me a much better speaker was producing this podcast. Simply writing and speaking about different topics every day recording episode after episode, and then listening to the entire recording, I've been able to identify a lot of the things that I needed to start and or stop doing to become a better communicator. Now, if you've ever heard a recording of yourself speaking, then you know how painful it can be. But please understand, that's exactly the point. The truth hurts when you're so accustomed to avoiding it. And if it's painful for you to listen to, what do you think it's like for everyone else to listen to you? If you can just get over the initial pain and disgust and embarrassment of listening to yourself speak, you'll quickly be able to identify your weaknesses and spend your time more productively by focusing on and strengthening those skills specifically.
Number three, this doesn't apply to all topics, but if you're giving a presentation, know what you're talking about or be a subject matter expert. My page is a health and wellness page, and a lot of the reason I'm able to articulate myself calmly, concisely, and not use filler words is because I know what I'm talking about. Filler words are often used by people who just aren't competent on a subject. My dad taught me from a young age, there's no better feeling than getting up in front of a crowd and knowing that there's not a question that they can ask you that you don't know the answer to. So if you're using these tips for a public speaking engagement, become the subject matter expert. Your confidence will shine through in your tonality, your delivery, your inflection and pitch, and your lack of filler words. But you can't get so good at it that you can just do it in your everyday life. You don't necessarily have to know what you're talking about, but that comes with time and practice.
All right, my friend. Now, as Michael said, you don't have to be an expert on every single thing you talk about in order to be an effective speaker. But it certainly does help to know what you're talking about if you're trying to explain yourself or prove a point. Now, Michael is talking specifically about public speaking, giving presentations or speeches, or even leading a group discussion. But one simple thing you can do to sound more knowledgeable in any given situation is educate yourself. This is why I've said many times before that simply being curious about life will help you maintain conversations with anyone. If you're constantly learning new and useful information, if you're constantly talking to and listening to people who know things that you don't, then you'll slowly aggregate more and more interesting experiences and information that you can contribute to a conversation. I said in a recent episode that I can speak intelligently about things like software engineering, IP law, business consulting, military life, and parenthood with anybody. Not because I'm anything close to an expert on these topics, but because I spent so much time talking to people who are. I consume content about a bunch of interesting things. I'm also just curious and ask lots of thought provoking questions, so I don't need to have anything interesting to say. But we'll come back to this in a future episode. Another possibility is that you've already been through a lot in your own life, but you've never shared much of it with anybody. I believe this is the case for a lot of people. We have so many stories to tell and so much knowledge to share, but we spend so much time isolated or just consuming other people's stories, so we never have the opportunity to share our own. And one very simple way to change this is by writing in a journal every single day. Getting in the habit of writing about one interesting thing you experienced every day will help you to keep those stories fresh in your mind and tell them in your next conversation. And of course, as an English learner, it'll help you get in the habit of formulating and organizing your thoughts in a structured way. There's very little difference between thinking and writing because you have to think before you can write the words on the page. So, with every sentence you produce, you're training yourself to think in English. And every time you read what you've written, you'll be identifying the things that can be improved about the way you express yourself. And I'm also sure you'll notice that you don't use words such as um, or like when writing in a journal. Instead, you simply stop and think about the next sentence you want to write. And there's no reason you can't do the same thing when you speak. So you don't have to be an expert on the subject you're speaking about in order to sound like a competent speaker. But you do need to be speaking and writing all the time, which leads us to Michael's next tip.
Tip number 4 would be practice in your everyday life. Don't just practice when you set aside the time to record yourself or take a speaking course. Use this in communications with your partner, your friends, out at the bars meeting people, work or cocktail happy hours. The more you can do this in your everyday life, just like anything, the more repetitions you can get, the more you can improve. Time on task over time. I do this every day, and I'm pretty good at it now. Shocker.
All right, my friend. So we just talked about getting in the habit of writing in a journal, recording yourself speaking, and self evaluating every day. But Michael suggests that you take it a step further and make good communication part of your lifestyle. It should be something that you're always thinking about and trying to improve. And this is true regardless of the language you're speaking, because good communication skills are universal. So if you haven't already, you need to get over the false or erroneous idea that you can only improve your ability to communicate in English by speaking English. This is obviously a crucial part of the process, but investing in your communication skills will enable you to express yourself better in any language. Now, by giving more attention to the way you communicate in any given situation, you will increase your time on task. So, when Michael says time on task, what he's referring to is the duration a person spends actively engaged in a specific learning or work activity. It's considered a key factor in educational and productivity contexts, as increased time on task often correlates with better outcomes. And this concept emphasizes focused attention and excludes time spent on distractions or unrelated activities. Educators and managers alike use various strategies to maximize time on task, such as setting clear goals, minimizing distractions, and matching tasks to particular skill levels. And that's why Michael ironically says, I do this every day and I'm pretty good at it now. Shocker, because this stuff is obvious. The more you practice the right things, the better you'll get. Which is why I'm always saying, turn off the podcast and put this shit into practice. Put your phone down and practice speaking with people. Study the art of communication and apply it in real world situations. Daily practice leads to daily progress. It's really that simple.
Tip number 5 would be find a course. Toastmasters is the one that comes to mind. It's really the only one that I know. I've never taken one, but I've heard great things about Toastmasters. They require you to do public speaking in front of people. They grade you in real time. They count your filler words. Seems like a really fantastic engagement. And that's what I would do if I was starting from scratch, trying to become a more articulate human being or a better public speaker. It isn't easy, but it is simple. Don't overcomplicate it.
Don't overcomplicate this shit, man. You heard it here first. So, to wrap up here, although online video language courses can be very useful for improving specific skills and learning a lot about the English language, the real course, the real education, the real experience comes from interacting with people. Communication is not like mathematics in the sense that 1 plus 1 equals 2 and that will never change. Communication is fluid. It's constantly changing and evolving over time because people are constantly using it in different ways, depending on their culture, their upbringing, and the times they live in. This is why 1 plus 1 has always equaled 2, but the English spoken today is not the same English that was spoken 400 years ago. Now, Michael recommends finding some kind of course that will guide you down the path to becoming a better speaker. So you can search on Google to see if there's a Toastmasters group in your area, or use a site like meetup.com to see if there are some public speaking groups there as well. Now, just in case you don't know, Toastmasters is an international nonprofit organization that helps its members to improve their public speaking, communication, and leadership skills. It operates through local clubs where members practice giving speeches, receive feedback, and take on various meeting roles to develop their abilities. The organization provides a supportive environment for people to gain confidence in public speaking and enhance their professional and personal communication skills. And if you don't have a group like this in your area, you can always start one. Now, I know most people won't have the time or the energy or maybe the courage to do something like this, but for those of you who are willing to take on a challenge like this, it can be a great way of helping yourself and others who have the same goal. You can also use language exchange apps like HelloTalk, Tandem, Episoden, Lingby, AirTalk, or Discord to meet people from around the world who would be happy to speak with you in any language you like. And in case you haven't heard already, you can join my language learning community on Discord and practice your English with my friends whenever you'd like. Just click the link in the description. So, if you really want to become a better speaker, if you really want to communicate more effectively in English or any language, then invest more time into getting the real world experience necessary to do so. I believe in you, my friend. I know you can do it.